Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Arianna Campbell, shareholder and consultant at BoomerConsulting, and with me today is Chris McElroy. Hi, Chris, and thanks for being on this episode of the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Arianna. Glad to be here and really looking forward to our discussion today.
Absolutely. So Chris is co-CEO at Schneider Downs, and today we're going to be talking about creating a future-focused approach to resource allocation. So I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. So before we get into the details and talking about things around resource allocation, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and also share just a little bit about your firm?
Wonderful, Arianna. So as you noted, I'm co-CEO of Schneider Downs. My background is in tax, and the majority of my 30-plus year career is with the Big Four firms. I joined Schneider Downs in 2017 from a Big Four organization and was elected into the co-CEO role in 2020. So a little bit about the firm. Schneider Downs is a top 60 accounting and advisory firm in the U.S. Our headquarters is in Pittsburgh. We also have offices in Columbus and more recently building an office in the Metro DC market. So a lot of great things going on here. I will say one of the first things that I did when I came into this role in 2020 was sat down with Steve Thompson, who's the co-CEO along with me, and really we focus on laying out a 10-year vision for our firm. We call it Vision 2030, and the strategy that would allow us to achieve our goals. I share that with you now because I think it's going to set the tone for our discussion as we continue on. And at the end of the day, a big outcome of that is, and simply stated, we want to be a $200 million firm by 2030. And so keep that in mind as we go through the conversation. I think there's going to be some relevance to that as we get into, resource allocation and tying it into our long-term strategy.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because when we think about, our conversation around resource allocation or really any key decisions that you're making within the firm, having that tied back to the bigger vision and bigger strategy is really key so that you're not having different initiatives happening in silos. So the fact that you all took the time to sit down and really have that longer term vision to begin with the end in mind and know what you're working towards is a really great point to call out. So as we mentioned, our topic today is creating a future-focused approach to resource allocation. So what does this mean from your perspective? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so again, you can't have a future-focused approach to resource allocation if you don't have a vision, you don't have a strategy for where you want or need your organization, what you want it to look like at some point in the future. So we try to really take time up front and lay out a vision of where we want to be and where we think we need to be by, in our case, by 2030. And so then by doing that and laying out some real clear pathways of where we want to be and how we think we're going to get there, then it kind of allows you to focus on what I think are the two components of the question of, looking at a future focused approach to resource allocation is where are we investing? Where are we investing and how are we developing and deploying the resources that we have once they're within the firm? So two-pronged question. So first, where are we investing? Advisory services, all things advisory services. We continue to invest and develop talent around those areas that we think are going to be key drivers of growth for us in the future. That could include, ESG, niche tax services that we built over the last few years. We're continuing to build on those. Client accounting services, our technology services. We're making big bets in the technology space, for example. We think these are areas that align with those practices and services that are going to create those pathways to, in our case, that $200 million goal by 2030. So we've been doing that. We'll continue to do that. Big part of that path forward. We're also investing in our core audit and tax practices. These practices represent 60% of our firm revenues today, and they're going to continue to be a significant part of our revenues by 2030, no doubt about it. Importantly, they're also going to serve as a gateway or wedge for some advisory services. Our strategy is to be the preferred, accounting and advisory firm to those upper middle market accounts that we value so much. Those are the accounts that really need our 80 plus or minus services. So along those lines, and again, tying into that strategy, one of the key elements of our 2030 strategy that we're actively focused on today, and we have been over the last couple of years and continue to drive it forward, is as an organization need to be great. Be great in everything that we do. Be great for our people, be great for our clients, be great for our communities. If we can't be great, then really challenging ourselves and saying we just shouldn't do it. I mean, that's what we're really focused on. If we can be great, let's go all in. If we can't, let's just not do it and partner with others that can do it well for our clients. And I think really challenging ourselves on that. So when it comes into our core business, that we are really laser focused on our industries, those industries where we are great. We've proven that we're great. We have the ability to go outside of our geographic footprint and win work and win clients in the industries where we have proven to the market over the last 65 years that we're great. That could be construction, that could be construction, real estate, professional services, not-for-profit, transportation. There's 14 industry groups where we think that we are, we really have the opportunity to be great. And again, some of those that I mentioned at the onset that we really are great. So I know I'm probably going on and on, but first is if we know where we think we can be great, ESG, all the advisory services, but also our core services, now we know where we're investing and how we're developing our people, right? So if you are, we're investing in ESG, we're investing all the client accounting services, but then when we get into our industry focus, we have the ability to now, we continue to invest in like top talent and really focus on it. But now we're able to tell our people that come into Schneider Downs, like we have a plan and we have a plan for you. And you can also be part of the strategy, to create your own path for a rewarding career. If you're an audit and tax, there's some functional expertise in there, but there's also the ability to say, you can be an industry expert in construction and real estate. And we're gonna co-develop a plan for you to be able to get as far as you want in our organization or continue in your career, even if you choose to do something else where you are an expert in construction, and we'll create soft skill training along the way. We'll create business of the business training opportunities so you learn the importance of leveraging technology or perhaps offshore resources. We'll give you opportunities to own engagements so you can have build client relationships along the way. So we have a plan as a firm, which I think is so critical, because then you can allow your people to say, hey, I can see that path for myself and have all the resources and support along the way to really grow, thrive, and succeed in my career. And so that's what we're really focused on. And it's a heavy lift to really to see that, lay it out, and get everybody 550 plus or minus people in an organization to buy into it. But that's really what we've been focused on. And I think what we continue to focus on is where do we invest that aligns with 2030 strategy? And once we have people in the door, creating pathways and choice along the way where people can get clarity early in their careers to see how to build and help create a really rewarding career once they're in Schneider Downs. So I hope that answers your question. That's a little bit of a filibuster, but that's from the heart and what we're focused on.
No, there were some really good things in there. So a couple that I would call out that really stuck out to me that I'd like to reiterate for the listeners was first, your mention of starting out with that vision, which then allows you to put together the strategy. But I think not only with being future focused, you're also being laser focused in where you are going to spend your resources, your efforts, your investments, which is huge because we don't want to do all of the things. We want to make sure that we're doing the right things well. And so then that allows you to really identify what resources you're going to need, what kind of talent you're going to need, and then to create a path for them that also is really focused on growing and developing them within those areas that support the plan for the future. So, I think that that is a really good way to look at it and a little bit different way to think about it, which leads me into my next question. So, scheduling is a huge area of focus within firms trying to figure it out. It can be a place of, frustration of trying to figure out the best way to do it, looking for a magic solution. So lots of conversations around scheduling within the profession. What are your thoughts on the difference between scheduling and resource allocation? Because you've been talking about resource allocation. So what's the difference between the two?
There's a huge difference, as my team leaders, our practice unit leaders tell Steve and myself. Like I'm kind of the, along with Steve, we're the vision people a lot of times, and we're setting the vision, trying to communicate that vision, continue to try to get people in line with, where we want to go. And I think that's incredibly critical. And so to me, resource allocation is that pathway to a successful career that you need to be able to tell your people when they come in, we have a plan for you. You have an opportunity to really like help craft that plan. And again, back to soft skills, the kind of work that you're on and all those things. And I think it's important that you lay that out to people and let them know that we do have a plan for you and you have some flexibility in different pathways that you can take for that career. That to me is like once under the resource allocation, maybe more along like the people development resource allocation. The scheduling piece is where the rubber hits the road. And a lot of times when I came in, look, this is where we need to go and what we need to communicate and how we have to show our people that, we have an amazing career opportunity to them here so that they can see it, feel it, and really experience it. Scheduling is where the rubber hits the road and the work is tough. And I think when we got into this and started looking at resource allocation, the first thing you need is good data and good foundational data to just see where your people are, where the jobs are, how they're going to, when they're going to hit, how they're going to hit, if they're moving around, particularly in the audit practice, like all of the above is the real practical elements. And in an environment where there's a war challenge for talent, it can get really tricky to be able to schedule in a manner consistent with your, that long-term resource allocation and strategy, the people development side of things, right? Like we have a plan for you, but the reality is, we need to get some work done here over the next couple of months. And so I think it's really important that you say, listen, yes, we see you as this long-term, long-term opportunity in real estate, but we have this client here that we think could be a great development opportunity because you can be maybe you can drive the relationship, you can be the lead resource on this engagement, develop teams. It's an opportunity to do some other things that if you don't have that long-term plan and vision that you can speak to, those kinds of the short-term decisions that, hey, we need you to jump in here, then it just becomes a little bit, it seems haphazard probably to the person that they don't really understand, like, hey, this is a short-term firm need. We need you to like jump in. There's some good things that can happen here and that you can gain from this, but it all fits into that longer-term strategy. Without that longer-term strategy, then scheduling just seems like perhaps an exercise to just get work done. And I think that doesn't bode well for, developing and retaining the very best talent, which we're focused on. So it's important for us of, what we're not working on so we don't have those opportunities or those situations come up. It's really that what we do work on is all consistent with that long-term resource allocation strategy. But there are going to be times it's not perfect. It's like having the foundation and then making decisions along the way that are as You want it to be 100% consistent with that resource allocation strategy for that individual, which ties into the firm vision, the practice vision, and and the overall strategy. But there's always the practical challenges that we have in scheduling. So if I could sum it up, resource allocation is that big, bold, long-term vision that ties into where we're going and that individual experience that we want to give people. Scheduling to me is more like the execution of, that execution of um, the deployment that kind of feeds into that long-term development strategy, and they need to be consistent, and and I think it's important, but there's going to be challenges along the way, and when you have them, it's important that you're able to speak to them and help your team understand, like, if it how that plays into that long-term strategy. So I hope that's what you're looking for. I think when I look at that, or you share that, that's where my mind goes.
That's a really good differentiation. And I assume to be able to achieve the goal, well, first you have to look at both resource allocation and scheduling, but you look at them from two different aspects. But it also takes a firm wide approach, right? Like we can't be looking at scheduling in silos. We truly have to be looking at it across the organization at the scheduling level so that we can achieve our resource allocation goals. So they have to work together short
Yes.
term and long term as well, while breaking down silos within the firm. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah, you said it. You said it well. Like, yeah, you absolutely said it well, probably more succinctly and clearly than I did. But you're spot on. These aren't mutually exclusive. They have to work, you know, together. And definitely like a short-term element. Maybe I was speaking toward the short-term element of scheduling. That there are challenges there, but it all has to fit in nicely with that long-term resource development kind of mindset that's really critical if you want to develop your people, retain your people, and give them the best possible experience. I think that's critically important.
Absolutely. So, really, thinking through what you've talked about with creating the vision, your perspective around resource allocation, the opportunities that it creates, the importance of focusing on the short term as well. As you kind of think about all those things and think about the journey that you've been on so far as you've been working with the firm to help to continue to build out this model, what advice would you give other leaders as they are thinking about resource allocation for the future?
Yeah, if you can't tell, I mean, Ariana, to me, it's super critical in my mind to have a vision. Have a vision, um, uh, communicate that vision. As often as you can. What do they say? If you until you say something seven times that people don't hear it, it doesn't resonate. So I think it's important, as a certainly as a CEO or a managing partner, but with your leadership team and the team you have around you, making sure you have everybody on the same kind of page through like setting a vision, and then getting buy-in from your leaders and cascading that vision to your team. I think it's like really, really important. And to me, you can't underestimate the power of having a vision, and then as you're executing that vision, there's nothing more rewarding to me when something falls into place that you've been working on. Maybe you talked about it 2 3 years ago, and then when you start to execute that, people start to see, and you can point back, like, you shouldn't be surprised by that. That was something we were talking about 2 years ago as part of our vision. To me, that's very, very rewarding, and it builds that trust that, hey, this team has a plan. We as a firm have a plan. So having that vision around resource allocation at a firm level, but also at an individual level, like, letting your teams know, continually communicating, like, we have a plan as a firm. We have multiple pathways for all of you to play a very meaningful role in this organization, and we're going to do everything that we can and continue to focus on how we craft, um, schedule is part of it, but other experiences, trainings, the ability to have choice in trainings or some of your client experiences, that you really have the ability to like craft a great career here at Schneider Downs. And again, it all starts with having that vision. So when you ask what advice would give other leaders, like, you know, have a vision, have a strategy. You have to put some stakes in the ground to be able to make some decisions. Don't be afraid of putting some stakes in the ground. That's the only way you can really make decisions around, investment and resource allocation in terms of the firm level, where we're going to invest, where do we think we're going to grow. Not be afraid of kind of putting some stakes in the ground, and then communicate the heck out of it. I mean, then you have to really get that buy-in in any kind of setting or form, at firm meetings, at practice level meetings, at wherever you have that, you have to continue to tie it back to the firm strategy. Steve and I do that consistently. At least we try to do, recognizing that it may be in our, super clear in my mind and his mind, but you have to continue to repeat it, and you need to have leaders in the practices that are part of it. They buy into it and they're communicating it as well. So to me, it's all about advice. Have that vision, get people around you that can help share that vision, buy into that vision, and bring energy to the vision. And those that get it, you really want to elevate them within your organization and help them carry the ball.
And I love the emphasis that you put on communication, because as leaders of the organization, you don't want to just keep that vision in your head. You want to make sure that you are communicating that as much as possible. So that was great advice as well.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chris. It was great to hear your insights. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We talked about talent today, but we also cover topics related to leadership, process, technology, and growth. But what all of our topics have in common is that they are crucial to your firm's success and helping you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. So if you like what you heard today, please subscribe, and thanks for listening.